I'm not insane. I'm not insane. I'm not insane. I'm not insane. I'm not insane.
Doing that all the time, it's not really.
Yeah, if it just sits around for a while, like Russ and I talked about that last podcast, where if you're gonna own a boat, you better have a reason. You better be going out and you better be camping and stuff. Like, if you own a boat and just let it sit in your yard, it's kind of a waste.
Right. That's why I say that people have boats around here. I'm like,
where are you going?
Like, right, the ocean is very far from here, and the bodies of water that are here are, like, liquid for, like, 3 months of the year. Why do you have...
Yeah. You're going to be able to go out for a week of boating, and then you're done.
I, like, had the privilege of going sailing once in my life, and it was a very, very enjoyable experience. So I understand, like, the thrill of just doing that for fun, you know? Like, if you want to do that, and you're eventually there. Because my friend's, like, grandpa... He wasn't like, you know, that kind of guy. Like, he wasn't like a... He had to, like... This was in New York, too, so it's in, like, Egg. Are we recording?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Cool. That's such a real, like, podcast moment just now.
Are you recording? It's like a Shane Dawson moment.
It is, yeah.
Are you recording right now? Is this on?
Yeah, it was, like, in, like, the Long Island Sound. And I was like, this was like my Great Gatsby moment. I was like, this is pretty epic. And then we got drunk and ate sausage.
Ooh, sausage is good. You know what I'm excited to do? Fried pork chops.
Oh, like when we go camping?
Oh yeah, just get some thick cuts of pork chops.
It is like a great thing to like do on a campfire because like cooking a pork chop, you have to cook it all the way through, so it's not like you overcook it, right? Like.
No, you don't have to cook it all the way through. You're going to eat a pork chop medium rare.
Really?
Yeah. If you're cooking all the way through, then you're just leaving out all the juices. I cook it around to like a medium to medium well because I don't like to eat my pork chops medium rare. But going around medium, it leaves it some room to be a little juicier and be a little softer. Because when we had them around medium. We didn't even have them all the way cooked.
But I mean, like, you could cook a pork chop all the way through and it would still be fine, because pork is way more tender than like beef.
Yeah, it'd be fine. It'd just be a little bit drier and tough.
Okay, the people don't know what we're talking about. We went camping last summer, and I bring my cast iron pan every year to cook shit, and it's like, we got pork chops and like apples and shit, and like cooked it on a pan on the fire, and it was delicious. It was like one of the best, and like something you wouldn't necessarily think is like camping food, like pork chops and apples, but it was amazing. It was really easy over the campfire.
It was very delicious. I even threw some whiskey into it and flambéed the apples and the porks together. Oh, it was so good.
God damn.
We can't wait to go back again this year. And welcome back to the campfire. I am your host, Adrian, and today I've got my co-host with us at the campfire, Seth.
Hello.
We're mighty warm, and tonight we have a very special episode of the Colorado Cannibal.
Yes. Tonight we're telling a very thrilling story of mountain madness in the Wild West. The story of Alfred Packer, the Colorado Cannibal.
A very controversial story that either justifies a man or makes a man completely batshit insane.
I mean, the real question is that if you were in this situation, would you eat people?
Or would you just keep walking?
Would you eat everyone in your party?
So tell me, Seth, who is the Colorado Cannibal?
Alright. Well, Alfred Grinner Packer was born in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania on January 21st, 1842, to James and Esther Packer. James was a cabinet maker and traveled around a lot.
People need their cabinets. They need to store the foods.
You need cabinets. You don't realize how much you need a cabinet until you don't have one.
Yeah, I only have like 4 cabinets, and it's absolutely terrible. You have like 6 cabinets in your house, don't you?
It's not nearly enough.
No, it's not enough for anything that you have.
No.
I mean, you have like a pantry, but like...
I literally feel like in my house that like everything's falling on top of me at all times because I live in a closet.
It's just so small.
And you gotta understand, it's just like been there and worked for the past like 2 months.
And somehow you make bread in a closet.
Yes, I do make bread in the closet. I made English muffins. I didn't make bread this week.
Oh yeah, I saw those. Did those come out really well?
They're so goddamn good. Oh man, they're like little. Oh man. Ugh. What were we talking about? Oh, cannibalism. Okay.
Yeah, we were talking about how.
Okay, so Alfred Packer's family moved around a lot. They went to Indiana, Minnesota.
As the cabinet business does.
Back then, it was like the frontier. No one like stayed in one place,
And that must have been a luxury item. So he must have lived on the better end. I wouldn't say he lived the best of life, but he probably lived some form of a good life.
I mean, it was a different whole universe. Like, it's hard to think about it now, but Indiana was like the Wild West back then. It was not like settled that much,
Yeah.
It was like the first Western people like going out there to like settle. So like a lot of people around that time were like bouncing around these different places, like looking for work.
Mm-hmm.
They'd like go to some town that's like a boom town or whatever, and it's like and that doesn't even exist anymore now.
Mm-hmm.
And who knows where these people ended up? I mean, that was just sort of like especially in that time, it's like you sort of just went where there was work. I mean, that's what the Packers did, I guess. Because Packer ended up going to New York and joining the Army during the Civil War, like when he came of age.
As every man does.
Well, I mean,
Around that time period, that's what most men did.
Well, I mean, the Civil War was one of those wars where people felt some sort of like moral obligation to like participate in it, like World War II. Like if people were gung-ho for that,
Oh yeah. What side did he join under?
The Union.
The Union.
Yeah, he was from Indiana. In Pennsylvania.
And he was in New York when he joined.
Yeah. He joined the Union. And, but he was kicked out because he had epilepsy.
Fuck.
Right. Could you imagine, like, having epilepsy in the 19th century?
No. I can't even imagine having epilepsy in the 20th century or the 21st century. And, like, there's literally studies for it. There's medication for it. But that's still a very scary thought.
Yeah, at least, like, now it's like if you have a seizure, someone might know what to do.
Yeah, it's more likely.
But back then, it's like, oh, throw some bacon on it. Or whatever, like...
Take this duck fat and smear it on the temples. You'll wake up in an hour.
Oh, you're suffering from a seizure. Here, drink whiskey. I'm sure whiskey is the solution to pretty much all ailments in that situation.
And I'm sure that when they saw people shaking like that, they also put, like, a plank of wood in their mouth.
Oh. Right. I did definitely see that on one of those, like, things about ancient Rome and Julius Caesar. Shoving a piece of wood in their mouth. Ooh, sexy. Anyway, Alfred Packer, after he joined the military and got kicked out of the military twice during the Civil War for epilepsy. I think like back then, these days you wouldn't get kicked out of the military necessarily for epilepsy. They probably wouldn't. I don't know. I don't want to speculate.
To a degree, it just depends on how severe your epilepsy is, because epilepsy can be triggered by like stress.
I think that you would not even end up in the military if you had epilepsy these days.
Yeah, I don't think you would either.
And my uncle has epilepsy, and like if you're not like on medication, basically, like now these days you can take medication and it like prevents you from having seizures most of the time.
Yeah.
But like back then, people were just having them. Could you imagine how terrifying? Especially if you don't know what the fuck it is. Like
exactly, and especially since like this type of disease does like something to your head.
People probably thought it was like demons when it was happening to him. So he got kicked out of the army, and he really didn't know what to do when he left. So he just went out west, like everyone else did when they had nowhere else to go in America back then. He worked as a hunter, a wagon teamster, a ranch hand, a field worker. Couldn't hold down any of these jobs though because of his disease. Eventually, though, he became a miner in Colorado and Utah. That's where he ended up. It's like I guess it was easy for him to find a job as a miner because people didn't really care.
Yeah.
If they lived or died, if you were a miner. Back then, like, gold prospectors and stuff like that kind of lived, like, on the edge of, like, society, you know? These were just, like, scruffy, disgustingly stinky old men who were, like, out there in the woods, like, digging for gold.
Just like, hey, man, I got the shakes. I need to go in there and I'm going to get me some silver and gold.
But yeah, no, you're actually, like, that's actually it, where it's, like, there were so many people prospecting for gold and stuff like that. An individual wouldn't necessarily make that much money from, like, gold panning.
Mm-hmm.
They make enough money basically at the end of the season to go back into town, get drunk all winter,
yeah,
buy a lot of hookers, and then go back and do the same thing next year. That's like what these guys were up to. They weren't making it rich.
It's like the guys in the oil industry.
I mean, that's like the same thing now. Like,
yeah.
Gold obviously isn't as valuable as oil, like, in our day and age, so it's like, that's like kind of a version of that, where it's like you go travel around to different places. Like, there's a lot of those, like, areas in, like, North Carolina where it's like just like mining camps, basically.
Yeah.
And it's all dudes.
All guys.
It's like a lot of dudes getting drunk.
It's just a giant sausage fest.
And, like, they, and they all just, like, finger each other's buttholes and stuff. Yeah, so he was sort of ended up as a miner and ended up in Utah as a gold prospector. And in those days, people kind of traveled to where there were new finds of, like, gold and stuff like that. Mm. So in 1873, there was a gold field that was discovered near Breckenridge, Colorado. Which is now this, like, fancy, huge, like, ski resort. But at the time, it was, like, a disgusting, like, dank, like, mining town.
Just trees and snow and just miners.
And men with greasy hair and, like, who haven't washed their asshole in 8 months.
Yeah.
So 20 men who had been working in Bingham Canyon near Salt Lake City in Utah left to Breckenridge to take advantage of this new gold discovery.
You know that it was just like a whole bunch of men that were drinking. This dude just, like, kicked in the door, drunk as hell, and was like, "Hey, everyone listen, there's a bonanza and a electric boogaloo down in Breckenridge. Let's go! Go! Let's go!"
I'm sure, like, he could barely walk straight as he was, like, walking out to go to the Gold Bonanza and, like, get on his horse. Like,
he was super excited to get to that bonanza.
Back in those days, it was like people started drinking in the morning. People didn't drink water; they drank whiskey.
It was a cold medicine too. It was like, oh, you got the coronavirus? Take a shot of whiskey.
I'm pretty sure they, like, rationed out, like, food and whiskey, like, during war times, like, to people. Like,
definitely,
it was considered an essential. The whole society was held together with alcohol. That will come to, like, that'll be clearly obvious by the end of the story.
Oh, definitely.
So these guys are traveling from the mountains outside of Salt Lake, and they travel down on the way to Colorado, and they end up in Provo, and they encounter this dude, Alfred Packer, who, he has kind of developed a reputation over the years as a pathological liar. He was generally distrusted by people he encountered. Like, he had a reputation for being a bullshitter. In this particular situation, he claimed to the people who were traveling through that he was, like, a wilderness guide and was, like, really familiar with the terrain of Colorado and, like, would be able to guide them. So he was sort of offering his services up as a guide to them, even though this dude didn't know shit about shit, basically.
Just straight bullshit liars. Yeah, I can take you through the mountain. Never been to Colorado, but I can take you through. I was a Boy Scout.
I mean...
He was probably a self-proclaimed Eagle Scout, to be honest.
I mean, you could probably take one whiff of him and realize that, like, he was not the person you trusted, but no.
You were like, this guy just smells exactly like whiskey and buttholes.
Right. It's like, nah. I'm like, you don't trust the guy who smells like rat piss and anus. See, I mean, none of them were really, like, prepared for what they were doing. I mean, these guys really were not, like, wilderness, like... I mean, they were, like, people who came from, like, the east, who came out west to, like, develop great, like, fortunes, like, mining gold, right?
Yeah.
Like, they were not people who were, like, really wilderness people. They were people who became wilderness people, who really didn't know what they were doing, right?
Yeah. So these guys are just like, oh, I'm going to take this plant here that looks like a tobacco leaf with pointy ends. I'm going to spread it on my asshole, and then quickly realize, oh, that's poison oak.
Right, or like, instead of traveling through the mountain pass to get to where I'm going in the middle of the fucking winter, I'll follow the river. No, I'll go through the mountain pass instead of following the river. That's the kind of shit that they were doing. Or like, I'm not going to bring enough food to like get the whole journey through.
I mean, why follow the river when you can just go straight up the mountain, right?
I'm not going to bring enough food or weapon or ammunition to like actually survive. Like, I'm just going to go because I'm going to make a bunch of money that I'm going to blow on hookers and booze, like, immediately.
I'm going to bring my pickaxe, but I'm not going to actually bring an axe because why would I bring an axe?
Also, as evidence, these guys were clearly shit-faced the whole time, so they weren't exactly making the best decisions.
How much you want to bet their rations were like 15 bottles of whiskey, 14 bottles of gin, 3 bottles of wine, and then some beef jerky?
Yeah, a loaf of bread. Like hardtack.
And not even a loaf of bread. One guy had a sweet roll.
A sweet roll. Yeah, a bao bun.
One roll.
That's like what they did though. Like on the way, like on their first like leg of their journey, where they traveled into Colorado to Montrose.
Mm-hmm.
Which, by the way, is the freaking desert. People like that journey. Like,
yeah. Why would you even want to go to Montrose?
Or it's like
empty.
But it's not like you need like special supplies and equipment to be like traveling there by foot like for several weeks, right?
Especially during the winter.
Yeah, there's not like game.
No. Like, even during the summer, that's a little hard because it's very hot and just humid. It's not a good place to be.
This was in November, and like it's cold as shit in the desert in winter, and it's not like a good situation for anybody. And yeah, they were just not prepared, and they almost like they ran out of food before they ended up in Montrose, which was really like geographically like. From Utah to Montrose is like the desert, and then from Montrose to Breckenridge is the mountains.
Yeah.
And it's like actually really rugged, intense mountains that are hard to pass through, like the San Juans.
Mm-hmm.
So like the only real way to get through from Montrose to Breckenridge is to follow the Gunnison River through this valley and then travel on this mountain pass to get to Breckenridge. Or like the valley that Breckenridge is in.
Yeah.
And it's like not something that, if you've ever been there, you should do in the winter.
No,
you can't even drive there in the winter. It's like hard, you know? Like,
yeah, they literally close that off during the snow season, just because it's very dangerous to go through.
Right, it's like if you manage to make it through the valley, like there is an intense mountain pass you have to go over to get to Breckenridge. It's like ridiculous that they were doing that in the first place.
And even if it is open while it's snowing, it's kind of hard to pass through because you have to go through all this like mountain range, and you have to go through different plows. You'll see at least 4 or 5 plows on your way up, and
right.
They're going to decrease your speed, but I mean, you want to be behind them because they're going to be plowing the way for you and keeping a clear path.
Right, and this was in the 19th century, so there are no roads. You're basically just following geography to get to where you're going.
Yeah, on a horse.
On a horse. Well, here's the thing. So they ended up in Montrose, and they ended up in the camp of Chief Ure of the Tabawache band of the Ute tribe. And Chief Ure greeted the men into his camp, welcomed them, gave them food and shelter and everything. Mm-hmm. And then when they told him what they were doing, he was like, "That's dumb. You really should not do that. You should not try to travel through the mountain pass in the middle of the winter because you will die." Also, that winter was a very bad winter. Like, there have been a lot of blizzards. And Ure was like, "You really should just stay here and wait until the springtime to pass through because you will die. Like, there's not enough food. Like, the weather's really intense." Like, everything that we were just saying. But the men insisted that they were going to travel, like, through. Well, the people who had horses couldn't travel through because horses could not pass through the pass during the winter. But the people who didn't have horses still wanted to press on, and Ure was like, "Okay, if you want to do it, you have to follow the river." because that's the only way you can do it like safely, like without passing through like insane altitudes and stuff like that, and crazy weather.
You know, basic survival. Follow the river.
Yeah, like literally Boy Scouts like follow the river, but these guys were just like drunk idiots and like
they're just like, yeah, follow the river. This guy don't know shit. He's never been out in the wild before. I've been in the wild before. He's just, you know, a native. He's just
You're from Pennsylvania. Anyway, but like
you know, I'm just the chief.
Right, and so they like a group of 11 of the 20 men left Chief Uray's camp, and of those group, half of them went up the river, and half of them, for some fucking reason, listened to Alfred Packer, who said he was an expert, and said to follow them, instead of going by way of the river, to go through the San Juan Mountains, which are insanely rugged mountains that, like...
Smart.
Yeah.
Smart.
Even though, like, geographically, the distance is identical. Like, you're not saving any time. It's ridiculous. And, so, you know, Chief Uray offered to house the men all winter, and actually house like half of them all winter, and a quarter of them went by way of the river, and then a quarter of them, a group of about 6 men, went with Alfred Packer as their guide up into the mountain pass, and then
I'm assuming those men, you know, they're having a grand time with Chief Uray. He's taking it real slowly.
I mean, I would just stay with the chief. I'm sure it was a good time.
Yeah, he's probably telling them a lot of cool stories about how they got their start there and what they've done there.
Eating corn, game meat, I would just chill there.
He was probably an expert at like catching snow bunnies and like antelope.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they like, you know, they probably like planned ahead and had a lot of like preserved meat and shit for winter.
Yeah,
they were probably set. You know?
Definitely.
I'm sure they didn't have to worry. They probably would have all lived. Meanwhile, they became someone else's meal. Oh, sorry. Spoiler alert. But yeah, the people that went by way of the river almost starved to death and ended up being saved by a cowhand. The people who went with Alfred Packer, basically, no one heard from any of them until Alfred Packer showed up in Saguache, Colorado on April 16th.
Saguache. I think that's the same place where Ellie and I went whitewater rafting. The Saguache River? The Saguache's rivers?
Is it a river?
Yeah, it's a river towards like Glenwood Springs.
I think Saguache is down near like Alamosa. It's like in the Rio Grande Valley.
It's probably a different river I'm thinking of then.
Because I like looked it up and was like, wait, Saguache's kind of like not on the way to Breckenridge. Like, why did they end up there? Like, they all ended up there. Like, they clearly went out of the way. And it was like,
he probably couldn't read a compass, right? He probably read it the opposite way around. He saw, you know, it was pointing north and he was reading the other hand and he was just like, oh, it says we're going south. We need to go north, and then turned it around and was like, oh, let's go this way.
I mean, it turns out he was just like a psycho. Like,
or was he?
Or was he just hungry? Anyway, he ended up in April 16th, he ended up in Saguache, and he ended up at the Los Pinos Indian Agency and hurled open the door, wearing rags tied to his feet, carrying only a rifle, a satchel, a knife, and a coffee pot. They tried to feed him, but he just like vomited when they fed him regular food. But they gave him whiskey too, and that's when he started talking. His original story was that he was led by this man, Israel Swan, who was like an older man. I think he was about like 65. And they'd hired him as a guide to guide them from Montrose to Breckenridge. But he kind of had developed snow blindness on the way and became a burden to the group. So Swan gave him a rifle, and then he was forced to sort of live off on his own in the wilderness, like with what little ammunition he had, surviving off of like roots and berries and stuff. The people at the Indian Agency, of course, did not believe him because he looked rather well fed and bloated, like he had just had some very big meals very recently. But they led him on his way, since I'm sure that was like a common like occurrence every spring, was people descending from the mountains like near death, like in Sakwache.
It would either be near death or they would be either well fed, because there probably was a couple instances where people would be going through the mountains during blizzard season. They come across a cave, and they slaughter a bear.
I mean, if you know what you're doing, I'm sure that you probably stayed fed all winter, right?
Exactly. Like, you slaughter a bear during the blizzard, you freeze the meat while you're up there, and you eat what you can, come down with rationings, and then you cure it in town.
I've heard bear meat is not good. That you have to prepare it in a certain way so it doesn't taste shit.
It's probably really, really tough. I mean, they say the more active the animal, the more, like, harder it is and stringier is the meat, because they have so much muscle.
And, like, I think carnivores are, like, really... Not that a bear is a carnivore, but, like, animals that eat meat generally have gamey or nastier, like, meat.
And it's like... You think about it, like, if moving around makes the muscle worse to eat, then why would you eat human meat? We're the most active.
No, humans are lazy pieces of shit. We have the tenderest, fattiest fucking meat. What are you talking about?
All we eat is
Dude, a
just
fucking
fat.
American is probably just like the most fucking fatty, delicious. You probably cook an American, the whole fucking grill catches on fire because it's just like, like it's all the grease.
Maybe that's why they have to have those, like, fully insulated ceramic and stone cremators. You can't cremate a body in a backyard. It's a fire hazard.
It's just like this, like it causes like a grease fire, you know? Like they have
You bring it too close to your house and it just catches your entire second floor.
Oh my god. Yeah, they wouldn't be able to do like what they do in like India, where they just do like open cremations here. There'd just be like public grease fires. That was a nasty joke. I apologize, America. Anyway, they did not believe him, but they led him on his way. So he was like, and also he claimed that he had no money and that he was trying to ask for money from these people.
Yeah.
And he went into town and ended up spending like $500, like buying like an inn, like a room in an inn, like going to the bar, getting drunk, getting food, getting like supplies and stuff like that.
Yeah, you just don't need money.
Which was like several grand, like back in the day. Like so, like he had a lot of money from somewhere, even though he was like clearly like theoretically starving. Like, but he had cash.
Super suspicious.
Right. So he's like going around town, and like this is like for several weeks that he's like getting attention around town, like telling stories about himself, about like his adventures, like surviving in the wilderness and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And like kind of a different story to every person that he talks to.
Mm-hmm.
So like people become suspicious. He gets a reputation for being a shady character. And while all this,
Man, go.
there's a dog in here. That's what that
Go to
is,
your mom.
people.
Go to your mom. So,
Yeah, so while this is happening in Sigwache, a couple of folks who were in the party that followed by way out the river, the Gunnison River party, they ended up headed by a man named Preston Nutter. They ended up in Sigwache and they encountered him. When they heard about Packer at the Indian Agency, they said that he was a shady character, and that was unlikely that Israel Swan just like first off, it was unlikely that they abandoned him in the woods, even if he was having issues, because it was just like not what they did. And it was also unlikely that Swan would have given up his rifle, also because it was a very like fancy rifle, and like
it's probably an heirloom too.
and also,
Like,
yeah, and like it was probably this man's only like possession. And they also noticed that he was really bloated, and they also remembered that he had brought his own gun, so that there was no reason for him to like get the rifle, right? Like he had a revolver that was with him, so there's no reason for Swan to give him his gun. So
Yeah.
they poked all these holes in his story to the Indian Agency, and Nutter, like encountering him going to the saloon and everything, noticed that Packer had a knife in his possession that belonged to another member of his party, Frank Butcher Miller, as well as a pipe that he was smoking that belonged to one of the other party members. And Nutter confronted Packer at the saloon. He got in a fight with him. Packer left and started to get a horse ready to leave town, basically.
See, that's where he ran into his problem. He shouldn't have just walked in there and confronted him about it. He should have told the local sheriff and then, like, hey, or at least came in with some form of backup. Like, he shouldn't have just gone in there himself. He should have came in and been like, hey, guys, at the river party, hey, we have a snake in the mist. He killed all the other people, and I know he's going to do something I know he's going to leave if I confront him. I need you guys' backup. I'm sure if he told them what he knew, that they would back him on it.
Well, the thing is that during this time, this was in, 1873, Colorado was not yet, a state. I don't think it had, a sheriff or anything like that. I think the Indian Agency was the only federal authority. And, they tried to convince them, and they were like, whatever. They didn't seem to give a shit. So, it was kind of him up to his own to kind of, deal with it.
Yeah.
Although, after that whole confrontation, ended up going back to the agency, and then sort of revealed, what Packer's, real, situation was, and that they suspected that there was foul play involved. And then confronted the agents there about it, and they all crafted this scheme whereby they would go to Packer and try to get him to join their search party to look for the missing hikers, the missing prospectors.
Yeah.
And it worked. They convinced him to help them, and they brought him back to the agency, and then that's where they confronted him, we think that you killed these people. Pointed out all the items in possession that he had that were stolen, and point out how much money he had spent in town, even though he had claimed that he was broke, and all these different holes in his story. And Packer kept to his version of the story, and they tried to settle the matter at the Indian Agency. And while all this argumentation was happening, and they were accusing each other of murder, yada yada yada, 2 Ute tribesmen walked into the agency in distress because they claimed to have found strips of dried human flesh, what they referred to as white man's meat, while they were hunting in the nearby mountain.
White man's meat.
Somehow they knew that from looking at it, which is interesting. And then...
wow.
And
that's insane. White man's meat.
And when Packer heard this, when he heard this admission, he collapsed to the floor and cried. It would not be the first time that people had been obliged to eat each other when they were hungry.
Wow, and he's just gonna come up straight up and be like, oh, it's not the first time people have ate each other because we're hungry.
It's it went from murder to cannibalism real fast.
This guy just dropped to his knees, started crying super hard, and was just like, it's normal to eat people when you're hungry.
Well, that was the thing, is that it was just the issue at that time for those people, even though it was horrifying that they had eaten people, it was not the crime was that he freely admitted that he ate the people. You know, that technically wasn't a crime. It wasn't technically a crime to eat people. It was a crime to murder people, right?
Yeah, it's desecration of the body. But I think that it is illegal now. It wasn't illegal back then. It became illegal later on in the 19th century.
Yeah.
With a different case that we'll have to look up.
And it wasn't even Colorado wasn't a state, so the way it would have been enforced wasn't the way it would be enforced now either.
Yeah, it would be a public trial of that county.
Or I don't know. It was the Indian Agency just did whatever they wanted to. I don't know if they followed due process. It's unclear. I think it literally, as they say, was the Wild West out there. So So he ends up admitting to the fact that he ate them, but does not admit to killing them, and he tells like this version of the story. Basically, they all had traveled into the mountains that winter, and really quickly were stranded by a blizzard and were starving. They tried surviving off of plants until some of the members of the group, not including Packer, pounced on Israel Swan, who was that older man, who was like the oldest man in the group. They murdered him, they started butchering his flesh, and then Packer just sort of showed up and was like, oh, this is what you're doing, I guess. This is what I'm doing now. And then, one by one, like over time, as the party ran out of food and kept pressing on, one of them kept being chosen to be the one who would be eaten. Probably based on their like age, right? And then their money and possessions were spread around the group until there were only a couple left. And then the two left were Packer and this man named Shannon Bell. Packer claimed that Bell attacked him with the intention of eating him. Packer killed him in self-defense by driving a hatchet into his head. Packer said they had thrown out much of Bell's meat despite having developed a taste for human flesh. He confessed that he found the breast to be especially delicious. This freaked everybody the fuck out, and the officers immediately like
freaked me the fuck out if someone said that that breasts were the most delicious part of whatever he was eating.
Why did you include that, dude? That's freaky. And you could have just told the story without saying that. And then, so they're all freaking out. They force him to like lead them to the place where the bodies supposedly were. He just led them to like a dead end somewhere, like, and then attacked one of the officers on the way back. So at that point, they arrested him. And then at that point, after he got arrested, he gave his like official confession, which was that the same story, that the men had run out of food, they got caught in a blizzard, but they had all together made a pact to eat the first one that died, and that was Israel Swan. They ate him, and then this man Shannon Bell, according to Packer, started to kill everyone else in the party in eating them, and then Packer killed Bell out of self-defense. So still blaming most of the murders on Bell. And so he was held at a cabin sort of on the outskirts of town, while they were waiting for his trial. And that August, after the snows had melted, in this place called Slumgullion Pass near Lake City, Colorado, 5 bodies were found in a gulch lined with hemlock trees. The first responders noted that the men looked like they had been befallen with extreme violence, with broken bones and fractured skulls, some of them with like obvious blows to their head, and their brains like sprayed across the ground. Also, their bodies had been skinned and the meat like flayed off their bodies, except for like their hands and their faces, which was like especially like disturbing to the people who found them.
Oh wow!
And like there were like cuts of meat taken from their bodies that had been skinned, but they had not been fully like butchered, like they had not been like cut open from the inside. And what was interesting is that they were only found like a few miles from Lake City. Like they were found in this place that was like from one side in a fork of the road. So they had gotten stuck in this valley in Slumgullion Pass. Basically, if they had made another turn at the fork, they would have ended up in Lake City and not ended up dying, basically. But Packer, I think, was the one who guided them up into their deaths.
Of course. I mean, who else would have been the one to take them to their death?
Right, but it kind of makes everyone there think that it was very much intentional, like he intended to kill them, and led them off into like a dead end, basically, to murder them. And immediately the discovery immediately discredited Packer's confession, because they were all found in one spot. They were all like killed at the same time, with most of the flesh intact. So it was like not a desperation, like he killed them, or someone killed them, and then just sort of scavenged meat off of them for a few days.
Oh, jeez.
And
so this guy probably was just up there. Notice he was getting very, very hungry, because he probably was hungry from the time before, and just slaughtered every single one of them, hitting them in the back of the head with a fucking hatchet.
Well, that's the thing, is that like what they at the time what they thought happened was that Packard had led them all into the woods to rob them and leave their bodies out, and that he had gotten stuck in there with them and just out of desperation ate the bodies that were just sitting there. That was sort of what they were operating out of, because he was there for like a while, like a few months.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, if they were really, getting to the point of desperation, they would try to go back instead of, letting each other eat each other.
But they just thought he was like a robber, like just a crook who like had led these people on to rob them.
Yeah.
Presumably he had done it before, and then anyway, they realized that he was like up to no good, and then they came back but found that he had escaped from the cabin where he was being held.
Just vanished.
Yep.
Jeez. Alright,
so 10 years pass after these murders, after Packer escapes, and nothing's really done. There's nothing to do. Between then and this, Colorado becomes a state, and
which was literally like a week of time, right? It wasn't even long that when Colorado became a state.
It was 3 years after the murders. It was like, he was like right there. Yeah, so in 1883, Packer was found in Wyoming, in Cheyenne, living under an alias. And the alias was actually one of the people that he killed. And he told yet another story. When they found him, he told yet another story that happened, claiming that Bell had killed everyone, and that he just was sort of feeding off of their bodies. But he was found guilty and sentenced to hanging at his trial. And the trial was in Lake City and not in Saguache, where the murders had actually happened. Basically, they had accused him, again, cannibalism wasn't a crime, they accused him of like premeditated murder too, with the intention of robbing these men.
They probably thought of it as, this would be a better... it would probably take more in trial with the jury than, getting him for necromancy or necromantic crimes.
Well, that wasn't a crime, like, to eat people. Like, it was like, the murder was a crime. And they were trying to figure out a way, like, but the situation, like, they just found bodies. There wasn't enough evidence to really say that he, like, really murdered them. Like, there wasn't really a strong case necessarily for murder. It was based sort of on circumstance, but they still found him guilty.
Yeah.
Like, to this day, who knows what actually happened there? Like, he clearly ate them, but, like, did he kill them?
Yeah.
It's not sure, but, like,
and he's the only one that really knows.
Well, he got off on a technicality because when he committed the crimes, Colorado wasn't a state, so technically it wasn't a crime in the same way that it was that he was tried for. So, like, he got off on a technicality and was received a second trial for manslaughter, and he was found guilty. It was sentenced to 40 years in prison, which in art it doesn't seem like much now, but that was like the longest sentence that had ever been given to a prisoner.
I mean, when everybody dies between the age of 35 to 40, yeah, that's a life sentence.
That was like what a life sentence was.
That's like a double
then.
Life sentence.
Yeah, they didn't have life sentences back then, so that was like the equivalent of it. And he was like, but he served his time and got off early, because he sort of gained notoriety among yellow journalists from the Denver Post, particularly a woman named Holly Pry, who like tried to brand him as like a victim of circumstance, that he was like a veteran, basically because like the story was titillating enough and famous enough that like it could get readership for the Post. So that's sort of like what was happening. It was like kind of just a business impetus, like
it was just a strategy for this woman, and it probably ended up working in her favor to make him seem like he was a victim. And I mean, we don't even know if he was a victim or if he wasn't a victim.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of like the media sort of hyping up criminal cases in order to get ratings seems kind of foreign to us in the modern day, but that was the thing that was happening in the 19th century.
Yeah.
No, I'm joking. That's something that happens even worse today.
I mean, look at what Joe Exotic's campaign has gotten so much more money now that they're actually contemplating way to get Trump to pardon him.
Please, for the love of God, keep Joe Exotic in jail. Like, leave him there, please. Don't get that man out of jail. He's a fucking bastard. But, hot take. Anyway.
Hot tea.
They got fucking
Sir.
Alfred Packer out of jail, too, for some reason. Basically saying that he ate those people to survive. Claiming they didn't really kill them, he just ate them to survive, and that, like, he shouldn't be in jail for something that he did out of desperation, even though it was pretty, like, he probably killed him. He lived his rest of his life, you know, like a free man, and died in Deer Creek in 1907.
He probably had a house and a couple of trees in the yard and some nice kids. Did he ever marry?
I don't believe so.
Sucks to suck, but he probably had a good life before he died.
Thank God no one had to marry him.
They probably would have ended up just like, you know...
Imagine you end up married to the Colorado Cannibal. I'm sorry.
I wonder... You know how when they first got him back to camp, he could not eat, like, food because he developed a taste for human flesh. How long do you think that lasted?
I think it's actually, like, if you, like, only eat, like, game meat for, like, a long time, even if it is human flesh, like, you can't process shit like bread.
So you think that he only could eat, like, wild things that he killed in slaughter? Like elk and moose and deer?
Well, you know, people go on those, like, fad diets, like keto and stuff. That's, like, essentially what happened to him. He was, like, only eating, like, protein and fat and, like, a low-carb diet. Like, he would eat carbs, like, roots, like, a little bit every day or something.
Oh, so he became gluten-free.
Basically, yeah. But what that does is that, like, changes your body's metabolism. So, like, when you do eat carbs again, your body, like, goes into, like, sugar shock. Because your body, like, adjusts to just not eat it. Even though, like, that's, like... All the more so why it was, like, kind of crazy that he was bloated, because he was clearly eating a lot of meat, right? Like,
yeah.
And, like, he didn't look like, you know, Jason Statham without a shirt on. Well, maybe he did.
Anyway. He looked like later Bob Saget.
I wonder what Bob Saget looks like without his shirt on.
I don't want to imagine that, especially now. No offense to Bob Saget, but, you know...
What were we talking about?
He's just older.
What?
Who?
Are we doing a show? Okay.
No, we're by a fire.
Oh yeah, the fire is crackling.
We're roasting marshmallows and drinking beer.
So that was sort of case closed. In the 80s, they did like a forensic smoke a beer, and then they did a forensic analysis, and they determined that the bodies had experienced a lot more violence than originally, like, thought. Like, there was pretty widespread, like, bludgeoning, violent deaths due to blunt force, like, trauma. The bodies had been, like, there were, like, cut marks on the bones, so the bodies had been, like, extensively butchered for, like, a while.
Ooh, do you think he threw the bodies in the snow and then, like, would cut them as he needs them?
Well, that sort of investigation said that, like, he kind of killed them all at once and then was just picking them off them for a while.
Ew.
And it's like...
Making jerky out of it, too? Because they walked up on meat curing, right?
Well, yeah, they had found preserved flesh. So, yeah, he was cutting it dry and, like, some yeah, and then, like, but, like, other investigations showed that it's possible that, like, some of the bodies were killed at different times, so it's possible that, like, the group of men killed the first group of men. Like, there was, like, they weren't all necessarily killed all at once.
I'm sure there was probably a couple of them that were against, you know, the whole thing, so they were like, we're not going to go and do that, while he was still, you know, Alfred was like, yeah, they're going to be the next to be done.
Right, there's some indication that it wasn't just Alfred who, like, participated in it at first, although he was the only one to survive, so presumably he did kill the last, like, few of them.
Yeah. He probably turned on the last couple of them just to make sure that he would be able to survive.
Yeah. But there's no real way to determine that the corpses were in fact cannibalized, because it's not like there's no, like, way to determine that. beyond just that, there's evidence that they were cut up and butchered. Like, there's no evidence that's, like, you have to test this shit or something to show, like, that there was human meat in it.
Sir, can I get you to poop in this cup, please?
But there's, like, a lot of, like, they're able to determine from some stuff, like, they find, like, Neanderthal, like, bones and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And they're able to determine that, like, they were butchered and eaten, like, by people. So, like, there's some, like, evidence that can lead them to know that a body was, like, cut up in a way that would indicate it was butchered rather than, like, just killed.
Yeah.
Like, to prepare for food. That's sort of what they found in that investigation, that they were butchered for food. But not, like, necessarily, like, bite marks or something out of them.
That is crazy.
The sort of legacy is that there's of Alfred Packer said there's an Alfred Packer grill at the University of Colorado Boulder campus. Part of their campus dining services, serving what I assume are burgers and hot dogs.
They probably also sell steaks and, like, filleted pieces of venison. Just as a gimmick.
Just like human brains.
They sell, like, different forms of exotic salted jerky. And they call it Alfred's jerky.
Oh my god.
Oh my god, there's a mixed drink and they put it in a skull for you as a gimmick. It's not a real skull, but it's a skull glasses. Let me get a bloody Todd, please.
A hot Todd. Instead of a hot toddy.
Can I get a pina colada?
Oh man. Yes, that's the story of Alfred Packer.
Wow.
Special thanks to Wikipedia. Please donate.
Wow, that's an insane story.
It is.
I don't believe that this guy was an innocent man. I think that he did, I think he did kill the last couple of people and then just took it to his advantage to rob them, which is not okay to do. And I feel like he did conspire to the group to allow these people to eat each other. The reason why is because with epilepsy, depending on how severe it is, it can make you lose your mental state. So there was a part of him that was already telling him that that was probably what was the right thing to do, and it wasn't necessarily the right thing to do. So some of the people in the group kind of went with him. They got down to the numbers, and he was just like, you know what? I'm done. This is it. This guy's dead. They're both dead. Everyone's dead. I win. And I got to try a new tasty snack.
I think that's like the only kind of consistent thing that you can say based on all his stories and the evidence is that he did in fact eat those people. That's like whether he killed all of them, it's unclear, but he definitely ate them. I mean, he admitted to that immediately when those people confronted him to about it. So it's like
he ate them and robbed them. Because he was spending money like crazy around the town, getting hookers and shit.
He did rob them, yeah. But it's like, was it a plan from the beginning, or was it just something that he happened upon circumstance? Who knows? But I mean, there's a lot of stories like that. There's obviously like the Donner Party. Sammy.
He's okay.
There's like the Donner Party, and the different stories like that of the Old West, where people were like dumbly like passing through mountain passes in the winter, and they ended up eating each other.
Yeah, and that kind of happens. Is it right? Who knows? I feel like they could have tried a little harder to try tracing back their steps and getting themselves out of the county. Because they weren't that far in the first place from a county for them to go and seek shelter.
In that situation, I would not have eaten anybody. I think that, like, as desperate a situation as it was a situation of their own creation. Like, if you're, like, just being stupid and that's why you're starving to death, I feel like cannibalism isn't justified. Like, literally 1,000, like, chances to, like, not get in that situation were presented to them, and they took none of them.
I'm wondering if Alfred case, it came down to it, and they were like, you're going to be the next to go. You're the oldest person to go. You're the next. And as they came to go and attack him, he shot them all and was just like, you know what? I guess I'm going to eat.
That was the thing also, is that they found, like, a deer carcass and, like, other animal carcasses around there, too. So, there was other meat. He didn't have to eat those people, he just did.
Yeah.
Like, he could have just eaten squirrel meat and berries and been fine.
Yeah, they could have...
Like, there's game meat in the winter in Colorado, I can guarantee you.
There's a ton of game meat. There's a lot of elk that still roam around. There's still a lot of deer that go around. They could have definitely killed bunnies and deers to survive the winter.
Like, these people were just idiots.
Yeah.
And
drunken idiots.
They were drunk idiots who ended up in a blizzard, like...
listening to some dude that is seizing out every day.
Where it's like, they saw this guy, and they're just like, oh, we'll trust this guy over Chief Ure. Like, this stank-ass, like, dude who's from freaking Pennsylvania. We'll trust this ass over
This guy looks like a miner. He knows the mountains.
Because we'll miss our opportunity to make booze money panning for gold at Breckenridge. It's so depressing.
Yeah.
That's so sad. Anyway.
So sad. Well, thank you guys for listening to another episode of the Campfire Thoughts. It's been a pleasure talking with you guys. Please check out our social medias at Campfire Thought. And if you would like to join the conversation, email us at campfirethoughtpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you guys. And have a very spicy and tasty human flesh evening.
Bye-bye.